The Biden administration has given $1.5 billion to GlobalFoundries to expand computer chip production in the U.S. Chip maker expecting to create more than 10,000 new jobs with the new grant. For more on this, we're talking now to TECHnalysis Research President and Chief Analyst Bob O'Donnell and Futurum Group Chief Market Strategist Cory Johnson. Guys, it is good to see you both on the program. And Cory, maybe I'll start with you here. Big picture, Cory, this administration wants to see this country ramp its domestic chip manufacturing. How does the news today, Cory, this news from GlobalFoundries, how do you think that kind of advances toward that goal?
Look, for people in the chip industry, this is a finally. We've been waiting for the money to actually show up. We've heard about these potential grants. We've known about the policy implications for this. There, of course, is great fear about the international dependence on production out of Taiwan. And we all have the memories of what happened during COVID and during the pandemic when it was just hard to get those chips. Now those worries maybe are behind us.
Well, they might be behind us, Bob, but, picks and shovels, as they say, right? So how close are we to actually seeing the money deployed and then some actual chips start rolling off the lines in these various places?
Yeah, that's a great point, Julie. It's years. That's the issue. Even with the money coming out, Cory's absolutely right. Everybody in the chip industry, in fact, I just interviewed Pat Gelsinger of Intel last week, and he's like, I can't imagine I'm talking to you today that I wouldn't have seen a penny yet from the CHIPS Act. So it's a great first step to see this big chunk of money, but you've got to build the factories, you've got to train the people, you've got to get the equipment in. It's still many, many years before we see these chips rolling off the line. But hey, you've got to start somewhere. This is a big step in the right direction. GlobalFoundries makes some very specific types of chips that are critical for automotive, for things like radio signals as well, for modems and 5G. So it's a very important part of the overall supply. It's not a huge percentage of the world's global supply, but it moves the needle forward for the U.S., and that's absolutely critical.
And Cory, one other issue that's interesting is as we try to kind of, increase domestic chip manufacturing, Cory, and the government's handing out this money. You can hand out money to build and fill, these chip plants, but at the same time, you actually need people, Cory, to lead and work these plants. It seems like it's much bigger than just handing out money. Ultimately, if the goal really is about domestic chip manufacturing, it's big policy issues too, right? About education and immigration.
Well, I think one of the most interesting things to me is that so much of it's moving away from Silicon Valley to the rest of America. Now, Intel, for example, has been in all over this country, all over the West, I should say, in particular in Arizona and in Oregon when it comes to chip manufacturing, and as well as all around the world. But you have Taiwan Semiconductor coming to Arizona and getting some incentives with the CHIPS Act. You have this GlobalFoundries announcement in upstate New York, of all places. You've got Micron in upstate New York. You've got other companies looking at to be in places like upstate New York. Columbus, Ohio. I was at the Intel, the beginnings of what is going to be a massive, at least $40 billion development in Columbus, Ohio, just a few weeks ago. So we see the beneficiaries of this going to places where there are workers who are cheaper than they are in California to do real cutting edge things and jobs that will be there for decades to come, not just the construction of these incredible foundry facilities.
And Bob, what do we know about how the administration is making these decisions of who to pick and where to pick? Obviously, as Cory said, there is a cost component to all of this, but in terms of who is the companies that are receiving these grants, is there a feeling that the administration is making the right decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the reality is there's not that many U.S. manufacturing companies, so the list is pretty short, and we pretty much know who's going to be on there. GlobalFoundries is on that list. Intel is on that list. Micron is on that list. And then we've got some of the other companies who are outside of the U.S. who are building plants in the U.S. As Cory pointed out, you've got TSMC, you've got Samsung, who's also building plants in the U.S. So I think it's sort of a known quantity. There is a question of how much each one is going to get and for what types of projects. But, as Josh pointed out, too, it's critical, the education process, the training process. There's a lot of things involved. You can't just throw a whole bunch of money at it. Like, Sam Altman seems to think, if he has $6 trillion, he can just make all these chips appear. There's a lot more that has to go into all of this stuff. And it's building those plants, it's getting that equipment, it's getting the people trained. And of course, it's knowing which type of chips the market's going to need. Because when you're doing this, you're planning several years out to what you believe the market's going to require. That takes a lot of very smart people who can figure those sort of things out.
And Cory, another issue for chip investors is export restrictions, and we're going to hear about this tomorrow from NVIDIA after the bell for sure. If you're a chip maker, Cory, you're not selling your latest and greatest to China. The Biden administration wants to, slow China's chip ambitions. Is that a realistic policy goal, Cory?
Well, I think what you see is two things. You see companies obviously not able to sell. NVIDIA is not able to sell their greatest AI chips, for example, Grace Hopper and so on, into China. But they're trying to find workarounds there. And I think that most of the facilities we're seeing are not, frankly, at that super cutting edge. We see DRAM chip manufacturing being one of the focuses for here in the U.S. and other things that are more commoditized, but will be great beneficiaries of being in the U.S. and being consumed by U.S. manufacturing. I think it's also important to recognize that politics does play a role here. And I think that that's one of the reasons you've seen a real careful, slow rollout from the Commerce Department here. They don't want another cylinder on their hands. And the Biden White House in particular, in this political environment, would rather be slow and careful than pray and spray. They don't want to just throw money out and end up with another economic disaster on their hand. And we've indeed seen some companies that have gone under that maybe didn't have the technologies, that just didn't have the money. I say gone under. Companies that have pulled back or even completely shut down manufacturing operations when they thought that some government money was going to come through that didn't come through. And maybe that being careful is a good thing, but necessary in this political environment when a single mistake will be pounced upon by political rivals of the Biden administration.
Cory, let's bring it back to investors here, because should they be following these grants with their investing dollars in shares of these companies? Is that a way to think about this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so, absolutely. I mean, if you listen to conference calls from all the major semiconductor manufacturers that are looking to do manufacturing, it is increasingly a question as to when federal money is coming, when CHIPS Act money is coming, and has it shown up yet? I think these announcements are going to matter. I think that the competitive advantage, because the ordering of semiconductor equipment, to Bob's point, right, it takes a long time to build these things. If you want to get in line to get the latest and greatest from ASML or from Applied Materials, you've got to get in line. And you can't get in line until you put some money down. And that's just not going to happen for these companies until they get this money from the CHIPS Act. So getting this money is going to give companies a competitive advantage to get in line first, to get these factories built first, and to have the long-term earnings production that these factories promise.
I mean, thus far, Bob, to take the last one to you, to take sort of the other side of that, the money has not yet followed, right? Intel, one example, GlobalFoundries up like 2% today, but it's down over the past year. So it feels like investors feel like it's still too early here.
Well, I mean, and the challenge, Julie, is, look, too many investors aren't thinking short term. These are long-term investments. So, I mean, I think Cory's right, long term, as long as you have that long-term vision. But, with everybody focused on this quarter and that quarter, this money is not going to make any serious impact on the bottom line of these companies for several years to come. If you're willing to acknowledge that, accept that, then you can think about doing this, because that's when the benefits are going to play themselves out. This positions these companies to have that future they can build to, and it gives investors theoretically an opportunity to take advantage of that down the road.
Guys, I'm feeling so nostalgic. It's so nice to speak to my old pals, Bob O'Donnell, Cory Johnson. Thanks so much.
Good to see
really
all you guys
appreciate
too.
it.
Much love. There's so much love in the room.
So much. Thanks, guys.